Hi, it's Katrina! From personal hygiene before toilet paper to male member control devices, here are 11 popular ancient objects and how they were used. Number 11. Cod pieces. Popular during the Middle Ages, the cod piece was a male accessory that both concealed and drew attention to a man's private area. It was appropriately named, as cod was the Middle English word for both bag and scrotum, according to Lynne Appino, who explained that the original cod piece was nothing more than a triangular cloth that covered the male private parts. No boxer briefs back then! Historian Grace Vickery argued that the earliest cod pieces may have served as personal protective equipment of sorts, perhaps intended to shield the privates from syphilis, which was spreading rampantly throughout Europe at the time. Over time, cod pieces became bigger and flashier, and as the accessory reached its height around the mid-16th century, it lost pretty much any protective use it once had and became strictly a fashion piece. Cod pieces maintained some utilitarian value, however, often serving as storage spaces for coins, jewels, and other precious items, but they were essentially designed to glorify a man's nether region more than protect it, especially at the peak of the fashion piece's popularity. King Henry VIII, who Appino calls the poster boy of cod pieces, wore one of the most bulbous and distinctive ones. Weighing more than 2.5 pounds, the accessory was decorated with jewels, making it essentially impossible to ignore. While none of Henry VIII's cod pieces remain, some of his conspicuously large accompanying armor pieces survive. Cod pieces fell largely out of fashion by 1700, disappearing from both clothing and armor. Obviously, I don't know, but it doesn't seem practical when you're trying to run on the battlefield. Number 10. The first breath mints. While the ancient Egyptians lacked the sugary diet we're so fond of today, they were far from immune to tooth decay, especially because their foods often contained lots of grit and sand from the stones they used to grind ingredients with. These materials eroded tooth enamel, making teeth vulnerable to infections. And as many of us unfortunately know, along with bad dental health often comes bad breath. Considering this is an issue even in modern times, I'm sure you can imagine that bad breath was certainly a reality back in ancient Egypt, especially in the absence of modern medicine, including dentists and oral surgeons. People with dental problems essentially had no choice but to suffer, as evidenced by the rotten and abscessed teeth scientists have detected in mummies, including the remains of young people. To combat the foul odor of rotting teeth and gums, the ancient Egyptians boiled honey with frankincense, myrrh, and cinnamon into pellets, effectively creating the world's first ever breath mints. Number 9. The Urumi. With a name that literally translates to curling blade, the Urumi is a sword that hails from southern India. The weapon possibly dates back to somewhere between the 4th and 2nd centuries BC, but it quickly fell out of favor in the region. It survives today among two types of Indian martial arts called Kalari Payattu and Silambam. The Urumi is known for its flexible, whip-like steel blades. Urumis vary in size and in number of blades, with typical blades measuring 3.9 to 5.6 feet long. Some blades are much longer, however, ranging between 9.8 and 16.4 feet long, and most are about an inch wide. And while one Urumi was rumored to have 32 blades, those contain far less. The more blades a weapon had, though, the deadlier it was. But regardless of how many blades an Urumi was equipped with, it was incredibly dangerous and difficult to master. Hazardous not only to the wielder's target, but to the sword's operator themselves, it often took a warrior years to learn how to properly use an Urumi. The weapon's flexible blades are not used for stabbing. The wielder keeps the blades in constant motion for optimal effectiveness against their opponent, furiously swinging it over and around their head and shoulders to achieve the momentum necessary to do serious damage. Using this weapon full force prevents the operator's adversary from daring to go anywhere near them, serving to create a barrier between warriors. Number 8. Ancient door locks. 6,000 years ago, an ancient Egyptian locksmith created what's believed to be the first ever pin tumbler lock, which involves inserting a key into a hollowed-out bolt and manipulating pins within the mechanism to disengage the lock. If that sounds familiar, perhaps similar to modern-day locks, that's because some of today's locks are built on the same principle, containing what's called a pin and tumbler system. Despite any similarities with modern locks, the ancient Egyptian version of pin tumbler locks were much different from any we're used to. For one, they were much larger, with some being up to 2 feet long. The first ever pin tumbler lock was made entirely out of wood, and it was a quite simple device. Its key was heavy and large and resembled a toothbrush, with wooden pegs that corresponded with holes and pins inside the lock. If you want to know more, check out historyofkeys.com. This is a whole field of study. Sherlock Holmes would be proud. The Romans and Greeks further advanced lock and key technology, creating smaller locks and introducing the use of metals for more secure protection. Many scholars view Greek and Roman locks as less secure than the ancient Egyptian devices that preceded them, claiming that the newer inventions were easier to pick. But Greek and Roman locks had advantages, with some locks being hidden inside doors, and the use of iron and other metals made for stronger devices. Number 7. Divja Babe Flute. In 1995, archaeologists Ivan Turk and Janez Durjek discovered the world's oldest known instrument, the Divja Babe Flute, in a cave near Cerkno, Slovenia. Estimated to be around 60,000 years old, the 4-holed Paleolithic instrument was created by Neanderthals, who carved it from the femur of a young bear. Despite its name, the Divja Babe Flute is not actually a flute, nor is it a whistle, although it's certainly capable of making music and was probably played in a similar way to the instruments of our more direct ancestors. It was carved for a right-handed musician and has a sharpened mouthpiece, which was crafted from bone and stone tools. To the surprise of researchers, the instrument is much more capable of playing notes than other Paleolithic flutes found throughout Europe, which early humans created from bird bones. The Divja Babe Flute is the only one that is known to have been made by Neanderthals and is 20,000 years older than other known ancient instruments, which is precisely why experts hesitate to officially classify it as a flute. Researchers' views of Neanderthals were profoundly altered by the discovery, which showed that our prehistoric relatives who went extinct around 30,000 years ago had fully developed senses of spirituality and artistic expression. Number 6. Tertorium. Have you ever wondered how humans got by when it comes to personal hygiene before toilet paper existed? A tertorium, also called a xylospongium or a sponge on a stick, is pretty much what it sounds like. Used by many people in the communal latrines of ancient Rome, this so-called hygienic utensil consisted of a wooden stick with a sea sponge attached to it. If you haven't figured it out on your own yet, people use this device to clean their behinds after going to the bathroom. And yes, everybody shared them, at least according to some researchers. Others believe that tertoriums were used for cleaning the bathrooms rather than the skin itself. The ancient Romans cleaned tertoriums by washing them in buckets filled with water and salt or vinegar. Their methods were ineffective, however, and bacteria spread rampantly throughout the latrines, leading to the widespread transmission of disease. But the tertorium isn't the only way the ancient Romans freshened their backsides. In 2013, researchers looked at some disc-shaped Roman relics that people once thought were game pieces for early games like draughts. But now, those gaming pieces have been reclassified as something more hilarious, as said by Dr. Robert Simmons, and something that people can relate to. These stones were actually an early form of toilet paper used by the ancient Romans. Known as pissoi, all signs point toward these 1 to 4 inch diameter discs being used for wiping after going to the bathroom. An ancient Greek proverb stating 3 stones are enough to wipe one's A bolsters this theory, as well as the recovery of pissoi at ancient Greek and Roman latrines and ceramic paintings of human figures using pissoi for their suspected purpose. Some people even inscribed their pissoi with the names of their enemies, according to the Daily Mail, meaning that every time they went number 2, they would insult someone that they disliked. Dr. Simmons from the Fishbourne Roman Palace Museum says that he hopes the piece will make people smile when they learn what they were used for. Number 5. Yaksha. A yaksha was an ancient dome-shaped refrigerator with a subterranean storage space that was primarily used throughout Persia. It worked as an evaporative cooler. In other words, it cooled its interior through evaporation. Constructed with thick, insulating, heat-resistant mortar called sarouj, yakshas were used year-round for storing ice and food in the arid desert heat. Persian engineers mastered the technology for accomplishing this by around 400 BC. During the winter, water was channeled into a yakshal from a nearby aqueduct and subsequently froze within the structure. Heat was guided upward via the building's conical shape and exited the building via openings at the top, while entries at the structure's base allowed cooler air to enter. Thanks to sophisticated engineering, water was diverted into a yakshal along the north side of the wall, enabling the wall's shadow to cool and freeze the water more quickly. Thousands of years ago, people could enjoy a shaved ice dessert while shopping at the market. It was basically ice cream before refrigerators. Well, actually in the beginning it was more for the wealthy, but even today there is a dessert that has been around for a very long time called Flute, a cold dessert made up of thin cornstarch noodles mixed with semi-frozen syrup made from sugar and rose water, served with lime juice and ground pistachios. That sounds delicious. A series of ceramic surrounding structures called badgirs, made from mud brick, often help to lower temperatures inside a yaksha by acting like an ancient system of wind towers, catching high breezes and funneling them downward. Some houses also use this method to stay cool, and you can see yakshas still standing today. Number 4. Santor. The santor is a percussion-stringed instrument or hammered dulcimer of Iranian or Mesopotamian origin, with the earliest known evidence of its development dating back to 669 BC. It was originally made from tree bark and stones and strung with goat intestines, which were beaten with wooden mallets called midrab. As the instrument spread throughout the Middle East, different areas and countries created their own variations of it. While the Persian santor has 92 strings, others typically contain between 72 and 100 strings, arranged in 2 sets of 9 bridges, totaling 3 octaves, which are fastened against a flat trapezoidal frame. The santor is considered native to Iraq, Syria, India, Pakistan, Turkey, Iran, Greece, and Azerbaijan. During the Middle Ages, Arabs brought the instrument to Europe through North Africa and Spain, and they also introduced the instrument to China. Nowadays, the santor is made from arguably more modern materials than goat intestines, with the left-hand strings being mainly of steel, while the right-hand strings are made of brass or copper. Number 3. Dental key. If you think getting a tooth pulled in modern times is excruciating, just wait until you hear about the dental key. Before we were lucky enough to have the trappings of modern medicine, such as antibiotics and anesthesia, the most important one, dental infections were typically treated by extracting the affected tooth. Easy peasy, except a lot could go wrong. Extraction instruments date back several centuries at least, with one called the dental key first being mentioned in 1742, although its use likely began around 1730. Modeled after a door key, the dental key was inserted into a patient's mouth horizontally before being used to clamp down on the infected tooth. From there, the surgeon rotated the instrument to loosen the tooth, freeing the patient from the infection, while also often inadvertently causing jaw fractures and soft tissue damage. The dental key was used into the 20th century, and its design evolved over time. It became obsolete starting toward the end of the 19th century with the introduction of forceps, although the torturous tool saw a brief revival later in the 20th century with an instrument called the dimpel extractor. While forceps might look scary, they are actually a much more efficient and less damaging tool. Number 2. Automatic doors in ancient Greece. Believe it or not, automatic doors originated in ancient Greece, though they were far from practical. Greek mathematician Heron of Alexandria developed an automatic door system based on ropes and pulleys, activated by water that was pumped from brass vessels into a second set of vats by a large fire, thereby opening the doors. It was more or less an early hydraulic system, and it was far from efficient, making it less commonly used than today's automatic doors, which are everywhere. Opening doors automatically in ancient Greece likely involved an hours-long process that was difficult to stop once it was in motion, according to interesting engineering. The Greeks probably used sliding doors to add mystic qualities to temples, where the altar's fire would be channeled through a tube into the vats of water that powered the doors. Closing the doors more or less involved the opposite of what was required to open them. The fire would burn out, causing the air to contract, the water to siphon back into its original vats, and the doors to close. Back then, this would have been a very impressive feat and would have really impacted people's religious experience. Number 1. Male member torture. Throughout certain historical periods and in certain cultures, masturbation was looked down upon as a sinful or dirty habit. Naturally, somewhere along the line, someone decided it was necessary to invent an anti-masturbation device designed to stop those who apparently couldn't stop themselves from indulging in some self-love. During the Victorian era, many doctors considered masturbation to be a drain on a man's energy and well-being that could ultimately lead to death. It became increasingly mainstream to believe that masturbation, aka the solitary vice, could lead to mental and physical disorders, including insanity, historian Dr. John Wolfe told News.com Australia. The time period marked the advent of numerous devices that could be likened to torture chambers, including one from the 1880s, which kept a man's member armored while generously providing a hole through which to urinate. If you think that sounds uncomfortable, imagine wearing the jogum, a spiked ring that was fitted around the base of your private parts to deter erections by causing pain. But history shows that these bizarre tools were ineffective, as evidenced by the plethora of pornography that was produced throughout the Victorian era. Thanks for watching! Would you like to learn more about fascinating ancient inventions? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. See you next time! Bye!